Well, we've reached the end of chapter 10, and I think chapter 10 can be summarized in two words: imperialism and religion. And I know some of you are saying, hey, those are disparate concepts. I'm going to pose the argument they can be synonymous with each other, and people's religious beliefs can dictate their actions, and or when a new religion shows up to a new place, that new religion has an effect on the indigenous people there. So if you get that. So anyway, the first term from this chapter, if you missed class today, is scientific racism, which is a philosophy. It's a way of thinking. It's a justification, in my opinion, for people getting into a boat, going to another part of the world, and taking them over. You need to justify it. And the justification was, we are racially superior to those we are taking over. And there was this pseudoscience that existed, phrenology, which said the contours of your skull made you, at a certain level. You are the most intelligent, you're moderately intelligent, you're not intelligent. And this persisted a long time. And then eugenics is this notion certain people should breed, certain people should not. Now, we apply this to animals. If you're a dog breeder, you say, okay, this is a dog I'm going to breed, this is a dog I'm not. I don't think anybody objects to that with dogs, but when you apply it to people, that's a pretty racist sentiment for the 21st century, but people believed that at the time. Now, I'm going to argue another rationalization was this idea of a civilizing mission. If I am going to show up to your country, I am civilizing the savage. You are an indigenous person, you're a savage, you're non-Christian, I'm going to Christianize you, I'm going to bring civilization. So you can make an argument, civilizing mission, scientific racism were the philosophical justifications of imperialism. Social Darwinism relates to this. So in the animal world, if you've taken biology class, you've seen these videos or these, elk, for instance, will beat the daylights out of each other, and the strongest elk gets to breed with the girl elks, and you watch that in biology, and you're like, okay, I get that. But at the time, people believed that applied to people, that certain people are superior to others. And again, you take social Darwinism, you take civilizing mission, you take scientific racism. I'm going to argue these are the justifications behind imperialism. Now, imperialism resulted in some changes, in particular for the African continent. Now, Africa was taken over to the tune of 94%. If you look at this map here from 1913, only Ethiopia and Liberia were autonomous countries. So these European countries, they called it the scramble for Africa. They met at this Berlin conference to make sure, hey, you get this piece, I get this piece. And you can see how pronounced imperialism was in Africa. Again, 94%. That's just about the whole continent. Now, the Indian Rebellion, also known as the Sepoy Rebellion, really shows the insensitivity of these imperial countries. And it started because the soldiers, the Indian soldiers, were either Hindu or Muslims. Now, Hindus cannot ingest beef, and Muslims cannot ingest pork. And the cartridges they used for their guns were either covered in pig fat or cow fat to offend all of them. And that's, a really heavy violation of their religious beliefs. And people rose up and they fought. Now, the Indians did not win, but it was a precursor to their independence, which occurred in 1947. It took a while. But again, I think the story is that indigenous people did fight back and the disrespect imperial powers had in their colonies. I think that's the point of the Indian or the Sepoy Rebellion. Now, the Congo Free State was in the book to show just how bad imperialism was. Now, Congo was controlled by Belgium, and there were just absolute atrocities, the cutting off of children's hands because they didn't produce enough rubber, and you can see this public execution to scare people. I mean, the Belgians were even too harsh for the other European countries. So imperialism had a really nasty effect, and I would say Congo, you could make the argument, was the worst example of this imperialism. Now, this cultivation system was a system of forced labor where the Dutch said, hey, listen, we're taking you over. You need to allocate at least 20% of your land for profitable crops like sugar and coffee. And then the Dutch took those products, those commodities, and they sold them and made a fortune. So it's almost pseudo slavery. It's, if you think about that, we are coercing you, we are forcing you to grow this, and we are taking it from you. So obviously, it's a bad gig for the indigenous people, and it's a pretty good gig for the Dutch. But that system persisted a long time. Cash crop production, very similar to that. There were certain crops that were more profitable than others. So what happened was they had this system where saying, hey, you have to grow these very profitable crops, and we're going to take them, we're going to profit from them. So related to the prior term. Now, female circumcision, I don't want to go into the details because it's kind of gross and, medical, make people cringe and whatnot. But the point of why this is in the book is that this was a procedure that was done in Kenya, and the British said, you can't do that anymore. And when you step on people's toes, you step on people's cultural beliefs, it really is going to breed discontent from the people. So similar to the Sepoy Rebellion, the imperial countries did not have a lot of respect for the native beliefs of the people, and you can add this to the list. Okay. And if you want to look at female circumcision, do that on your own. I don't want to talk about it. It's pretty rough practice in my opinion. Now, there's this word called syncretism. When religion will, show up in a place, it synchronizes, it blends with the pre-existing religion. So as Christianity hit Africa, now a lot of Africa is Muslim, a lot of Africa is Christian, but what happened was this African form of Christianity blended with the native forms of Christianity, and it's a different form of worship. And if you look at any religion, Christianity, wherever it blends, people worship differently in terms of the methodology and how you worship. So this is another example of syncretism. That's a real AP word for you. Now, Hinduism, the religion that is connected with India, this is, I think a lot of people in the West kind of look at the Eastern religions, we don't know a lot about them, as one flavor. It is not. And Hinduism had its form of syncretism as well. And it is probably best personified by Swami Vivekananda. Hope I pronounced that right. That's a toughie. And this was a Hindu figure that drew this big distinction between a spiritual East and a material West, this distinction between Eastern and Western culture. And his form of Hinduism appealed to those who were at the bottom of the caste system. So we see these changes happening in religion, these syncretic forms of the 5 world religions. Now, African identity. Now, identity. I don't want to go too sociological on you, but how you see yourself, how you identify yourself, is a changing thing. I'm talking to a bunch of young people, but you're probably going to be different at 36 than you are at 16. You're probably going to be different at 56, how you see yourself. Right now, you probably see yourself as a student, or I am a volleyball player. Later on, you might see yourself as an accountant or a mother or a father. So identity changes. So within the African continent, people saw themselves as these ethnic groups, but because they shared a common experience of imperialism, there was this notion of saying, hey, we're all in the same boat here. We're all African and we're all facing the challenges of imperialism. We need to band together and see ourselves as African, which is this pan-African idea. And in some places it took, and in other places it didn't, because again, identity is a very personal thing. Now, Edward Blyden, very AP, this guy doesn't show up in your regular AP, but I think he's in the book to personify that there were people who rose up within these imperial structures and became leaders in terms of they were leaders against this, to say, hey, listen, we already have civilization. We are already strong as we are. And he's one of the leaders that emerged during this time. And this idea of tribe, and I was told this by a professor at Oakland University. If you look at any other group, you wouldn't call your ethnic background a tribe. I wouldn't say, as an Italian American guy, I come from the Italian tribe. Tribes signifies a kind of a savageness, a primitiveness. So this idea of tribe, I hope you can eliminate. And if you look at all of these different varying, you see all these dots, and there's hundreds of different groups. These are ethnic groups. They're not tribes. Okay, so that word of tribe has kind of a negative connotation. So these different people within Africa, these are ethnic groups, and this notion of tribe just reinforces this very European imperial notion that these people are savage and primitive and they need to be civilized, that kind of thing. So those pleasant topics in chapter 10, but hopefully you got it. And that was just the nature of the beast in the 19th century. Imperialism was pretty far reaching. So hopefully you got those points. So anyway, thank you for watching.